At the start of any gacha game, the burning question on every player's mind is what are the best units to go for among the initial roster, chiefly among the 5 stars, and Wuthering Waves is no different. It's actually more relevant for this game than other gachas in light of the initial release going off with no shortage of issues, prompting Kuro to issue a fairly generous amount of compensation, not the least of which being a coupon that you can redeem for a free standard 5-star character of your choosing. And this is on top of the guaranteed banner selection you have access to upon finishing the discount banner. So with every player having been given the opportunity to acquire most of the initial roster, discussion was focused on which units to go for. The general consensus at the time was Kalkaro and Verena, with Kalkaro formerly being theorized as Yunlin's best duo partner before the nerfs, and Verena being the uncontested best support in the game, though she hardly has any competition in that department. Generally for most gachas, you try to balance the standard roster so that no one 5-star is head and shoulders above the others, and vice versa, no one 5-star is so far beneath their counterparts. Try as they might, however, there's always a black sheep of the group who, either because of their own internal shortcomings or through circumstance, falls behind the others in appeal and subsequent usage. At this point, it's become a meme. First with Chi-Chi in Genshin Impact and Yanqing in Honkai Star Rail, and now Lingyang in Wuthering Waves. Why is it that the Ice Element character always ends up as the butt of everyone's jokes? I understand the game has only been out for a month and things are subject to change, but it's been established at this point that Lingyang is not just the weakest of the standard 5, but possibly even worse than some 4 stars. For the first Why No One Plays episode of Wuthering Waves, we'll be addressing all the problems with Lingyang and see if there might be any redeeming qualities to the poor guy. Okay, I'm gonna preface this with a brief rant. This was an absolute nightmare to put together. I wanted to upload this video last week. The reason I couldn't was that there was literally nothing on Lingyang, absolutely nothing. Again, I know the game has only been out for a month, but there was more theory crafting and discussion on 4 stars than this guy. I checked YouTube for anyone with a fair amount of content, I checked Pridewin, I even asked a bunch of people in theory crafting discords, and legit could not find anyone who could provide me with sufficiently researched and tested information on him for a whole week. So with nowhere else to go, I checked Reddit, even though I know that's a terrible idea, and went to Lingyang mains, which had like less than 500 people, and finally I found someone. Shoutouts to Turo for the background footage. He's like the only Lingyang main on this entire planet I could find who pulled off a 3-star clear on floor 4 of tower. So before anyone gives me flack for making a Why No One Plays episode too early, this was the most difficult character for me to find information on in the history of my 3 channels. Anyway, rant aside, let's talk shop. Wuthering Waves has established itself as a more combat and mechanics focused game compared to Genshin Impact. As such, the game taxes a player's skill execution more than the strength of their equipment, weapons, and whatnot. There's a lot of quote-unquote hardcore elements present in this game, definitely not as easy to Unga Bunga. For many bosses, the likelihood of dying is very much real, or you might not have sufficient damage to clear even if you have good equipment. This can make theory crafting more ambiguous for a character, as the amount of equity placed on human error is high enough to where an extremely powerful character can be considered bad for no reason other than players being bad at playing them, or the inverse. Lingyang's poor representation is a result of such execution requirements, alongside theoretical and extrinsic factors. Starting first with this character appeal, one would think a game with a higher difficulty floor and ceiling would cast aside appeal in favor of practical strength. But as a gacha game, some degree of waifu over meta gets involved in whether someone is picked or not. Sadly for Lingyang, his design doesn't really do him any favors. Compared to the more traditionally attractive, cool, or cute-looking units like Yinlin, Kalkaro, Jinhsi, Changli, Jian, and whatnot, Lingyang's appearance is a stark contrast, beyond the fact that he's half-blind. Apparently, he was a lot more unpopular among the player base back when he had his old design, which made him a full-on furry character, and as you know, furries can be rather divisive. There's also a sizable number of players who just don't really like him as a character, which does play a role in usage, even if they are strong. Heck, even Yuanwu got a lot of appeal for being the classy uncle type, even though prior to Jinhsi, he wasn't really that good. Silly as it may sound, it does matter. The ideal scenario is for a unit to be strong and attractive or cute. It's no coincidence that the most popular units in other gacha games are so for their personality, sexiness, or adorableness. Firefly and Kafka in Honkai Star Rail, Nahida, Yelan, and Arlecchino in Genshin to name a few. Or just that, some people would be able to overlook his appearance if there were other positive aspects to him. Some people claim Lingyang's playstyle is not for everyone, and I'd be inclined to agree. His gameplay can be best equated to Havoc Rover and Dungeon. The gist of his rotation is that you fill up his forte gauge by using the empowered version of his skill, which is made available to you after using your 3rd basic attack and onwards. So like Dungeon, his skill has no cooldown and functions as an extension of his normal attack combo. Upon triggering his forte circuit, he enters an empowered state just like Havoc Rover, wherein he can attack in midair and unleash a barrage of rapid attacks. The duration of striding line is quite short, only 5 seconds at base. What you can and want to do is extend the duration with his ultimate, granting him bonus glacial damage and doubling the uptime of his forte circuit. With this in mind, Lingyang's attack style demands a fair bit of field time since the main method of attacking on him is to build up your forte gauge, then stay on field to attack for the entire time, making him more of a hyper carry death by 1000 cuts character and less of a burst attacking quick swapper. For players who like to mash buttons all the livelong day, Lingyang might make for a fun choice, but unfortunately this type of playstyle clashes against a lot of the game's mechanics and what the player base currently values. The keystone problem with Lingyang is that while mechanically he's easy to play in the sense that all you have to do is build up his energy to prime his ultimate, then use your forte circuit and start going to town, a multitude of factors can interfere in achieving a smooth and seamless execution. Let's start with the fact that most of his meaningful DPS takes place in the air. While it might seem really cool to bash your face against an enemy while 10 feet above the ground, your overall mobility is hamstrung while airborne, including but not limited to dodging, target selection, and altogether repositioning. In his defense, his skill transforms into a dash while striding line, letting you roll around in the air at your leisure. But in consideration of Wuthering heavily underscoring the need to make quick movements and whatnot to survive, this can make Lingyang appear unwieldy by comparison, and with a very short duration on his circuit, even with the help of his ultimate, any amount of time you have to spend dodging attacks is damage you're missing out on. Moreover, several bosses in this game are known to fly or jump around the arena, causing you to lose precious uptime in the process. Why this matters for Lingyang is that his DPS greatly hinges on going through the entire sequence of his empowered attacks. Since the majority of my viewers are Genshin players, Lingyang's attack style is almost identical to Yoimiya if she was flying like Wander. The main portion of her DPS is housed in the latter half of her normal attack rotation. Anytime you get staggered or have to reposition, you're forced to restart that combo all over again. Fortunately for Lingyang, due to being airborne, he can evade a number of attacks from enemies, such as any earthquake or short-range melee attack. But this is not foolproof. You still have to be careful of attacks that can knock you down, and with endgame bosses dealing enough damage to one-shot DPS characters even at full HP, it's almost assured that Lingyang will have to dodge, further worsening his practical DPS. Much of this can be alleviated by obtaining his S1, giving him super armor against any non-crowd control based attack after using his ultimate, but realistically speaking, this should have been part of his base kit, since no alternative solutions for getting staggered are present in this game. Unlike in Genshin where shields can let you ignore basically everything and stand still attacking, shields in Wuthering do not give super armor to teammates, essentially making Lingyang's S1 almost obligatory for you to comfortably play him. Incidentally, even with S1, Lingyang can be a rather unforgiving character. Inevitably, you will run into situations where either A, you're forced to avoid enemy attacks, or B, you have to try and chase them down if they're running away. Additionally, as someone who requires extensive time on field, it can be difficult to take advantage of any of the benefits afforded to you through quick swapping. Though he does maintain the forte empowered state even if he swaps out, as a reminder, Lingyang greatly depends on achieving his full combo, uninterrupted whatsoever. Alongside that, not only is quick swapping extremely difficult to do on him given his fast animations, but there's not much benefit in doing so, as animation cancelling an attack on a death by 1,000 cuts attacker like him is less impactful, as opposed to someone like Yinlin who not only has longer animations but concentrates a substantial amount of damage into less attacks. You don't really save much time swap cancelling one of Lingyang's punches or kicks, and even if you did, the 1 to 2 seconds you lose by swapping out then swapping back results in a greater loss of DPS than what you would gain from any attack you swap cancel. Then there's also the concern of being focused on aerial combat. One major drawback of fighting in the air is that you cannot activate your main echo, which for some DPS characters consists of half of their burst rotation. The best DPS echoes are those that can be swap cancelled, but once again Lingyang is someone who wants to avoid swapping out during his rotation due to a considerable loss of DPS in doing so. Overall, from a playstyle perspective, though it's arguably the most unique in the entire game, the counterintuitive and counterproductive elements in his kit compromise on practicality far more than what most are willing to tolerate. Exacerbating the absence of quality of life in his kit is a sheer contrast between him and Jinhsi, who was released last week and possesses a similar airborne playstyle to Lingyang, only it actually feels good to play on her. For one, Jinhsi's attack rotation while empowered retains its sequence. In layman's terms, you can space her attacks out and even swap out and swap back in, and she can continue her combo sequence as if you were just mashing on her. In addition, her empowered state can be triggered at will just by attacking 4 times beforehand. Basically, Jinhsi is more flexible and accommodating. She can swap out, reposition, cast other skills and stuff before resuming her attack combo, none of which is doable on Lingyang. That's not even counting all the other things in her kit. I'm aware they're not the same element, but it goes to show you how much more forgiving they made Jinhsi and how unforgiving Lingyang is. Once again, all of these hurdles wouldn't be much of an issue if the reward corresponded to the effort demanded of you. Sadly, it doesn't. Even on the off chance everything goes perfectly, Lingyang doesn't really do that much. In terms of DPS, he falls behind other hypercarry-oriented units. Though he has a number of damage boosting passes and effects, his base numbers are by and large quite low. If we look at his multipliers, they don't really measure up to the stronger cast members like Jian, Jinhsi, Yinlin, or even the likes of Havoc Rover. Wuthering Waves is kinda situated like an inverse spell curve, where you have characters on one side who deal a ton of damage in a few hits, and characters on the other side who deal a low amount of damage across a billion hits. Lingyang is closer to the latter group, but he doesn't have quite the same massive quantity of attacks even though his damage isn't very good, especially when counting for all the ways in which you can lose DPS. Granted, much of this can be attributed to the absence of proper synergy both in teammates and equipment. Prevailing Wisdom has him paired up with Sanhua for mostly superficial reasons. Sanhua's outro skill works nicely with Lingyang's basic attack-oriented playstyle, and Dura 6 can give bonus attack for him as well. But Sanhua works best as a quick swap attacker courtesy of her absurdly fast rotations. In essence, she's the best pair for Lingyang purely because there are no other options available for him. Dedicated supports in general are practically non-existent in Wuthering at the moment. It's mostly just damage dealers and healers. This means the best team comps are those who can have 2 DPS units swap between each other and alternate their attacks like Havoc Rover and Dungeon or Kalkaro and Yinlin, so your only real option is Sanhua. Not saying she's a bad choice for him, the fact that she takes up virtually no field time makes her convenient for Lingyang who does need a lot of field time, but it's a lot different from having a real support type character like your Bennett's, Kazuha's, Farinas, that kind of stuff. If a Glacial support unit comes out in the future who can really augment his playstyle either in damage or usability, that could definitely change things in the future. On the equipment side of things, hybrid carries have a tough time utilizing high-cost echoes as those typically consist of transformations, effectively serving as a fourth teammate. The Labilumin Myriad Echo has one of the longest transformation times in the game, disqualifying you from using with Lingyang who needs every second he can get. Other options are not particularly appealing either, even the new 1.1 echoes. Lumi's Skill Construct might be a decent choice given you can swap cancel it, but it's still not a very ideal echo for Lingyang. It might be a while before a hyper carry friendly Glacial Echo is released. Some Lingyang players have experimented with the Mech Abomination for the Lingering Tune set, as that is a more user-friendly active for him than the other sets, but once more, it's another case of good because there aren't any real good options. Weapon-wise, as a hybrid carry, Lingyang wants any gauntlet that can offer a lot of carry-oriented stats like crit and crit damage. Right now, most 4-star gauntlets are either supporty, bruise-oriented, or unusable on him. For example, the Stenard does offer crit rate, but the passive is almost worthless to him. The 5-star gauntlet Abyss Surges is usable thanks to increasing basic attack damage, but the second stat it gives is percent attack, which isn't quite as valuable as crit stats. Lingyang already gets a lot of attack from other sources, both within and without, so by law of diminishing returns, crit would be more efficient on him. Altogether though, there's only so much you can do to compensate for poor multipliers, and Lingyang's damage numbers are definitely more akin to a 4-star character. I believe he even gets out DPS by Dungeon when you account for some margin for error. Don't quote me on that though, like I said, theory crafting is still very much in its infancy. However, not having a proper echo, proper support, and proper weapon contributes a relevant amount to his underwhelming damage. In totality, Lingyang's just mediocre. He's not Yanqing or Qiqi levels of bad, but in relation to everyone else, he gives off that impression. A lot of people aren't a fan of his design and/or playstyle, and he doesn't stack up all that well against the competition. I'm not sure if Kuro is open to balance adjustments compared to Hoyo, but if they are, Lingyang definitely needs a buff. Most of his gameplay problems would be remedied if they gave him more damage and made S1 part of his default kit. That would make him an actual high-risk, high-reward character instead of a low-reward like right now. Most of the other DPS units can accomplish more than he can, but with a significantly more lenient margin for error. That concludes my first episode of Why No One Plays for Wuthering Waves. Again, I know it's very early to make one of these episodes, but if we also include the closed betas and such, I think there's enough empirical data justifying Lingyang's play rate or lack thereof. Also, if anyone from Kuro is watching this, I tried my best to highlight all the shortcomings of his kit, so if you are willing to buff characters, then please make him first, either him or Talchi, who might be my next Why No One Plays. But anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, it would be great if you love to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFarum, join my Discord server, and why not check out my Why Everyone Plays rover if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.